Go ahead.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Don't Know Ball podcast. My name is Isaac Isringhausen. I'm joined by Josh Coloni, Lucas Dalton, and Caleb Woods, as Jack Garner is our live studio audience member. And today we have a very special guest here, a Lindenwood University graduate and a current Bally Sports Midwest analyst. Right? Is that what you are? A analyst for Bally? Host analyst for.
I don't think I can analyze many games. I just tee it up for all the experts like Bernie Federko and Brad Thompson and Jim Edmonds and Alabama.
Yeah.
Well, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Scott Warmann. Scott, how are you doing today?
Great to be with you guys. I'm doing great, man. Great to be with you. Thank you for asking me to be on your podcast.
Well, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Really, anytime we have someone who has not only been to Lindenwood but has also been part of sports broadcasting, sports hosting, like just different things like that for as long as you've been, it's really an honor to get to talk to you and get to pick your brain a little bit.
It shows how old I am. I'm probably could be your guys' parents, and that kills me.
So we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you mentioned how when you got started, you got thrown to the wolves a little bit, but that's really the best way to learn. And I know you talked about Greg Amsinger will tell you the same thing, and I briefly had a conversation with Greg my first semester here at a seminar that I attended, and that's really just what it is. Because that's the only way you can learn is to go out there and make mistakes early while you can.
Yeah, I mean, especially for those who are at Lindenwood or any other university or college out there. But I know obviously firsthand being at Lindenwood, you just get hands-on. You take the basic 151. I'm assuming they still have MASCOM 151 basic course, and the next thing you know, you're on the radio station. And I remember Glenn Cerny was the GM at the time. We're talking 1989. And Glenn, who was also a graduate of Lindenwood back in the 70s, he said, which shift do you want to be on the air? I'm going, dude, I have no experience. He goes, oh, I know that. How are you going to get experience? He goes, by being on the air. Which shift do you want? I'm like, okay, this is not going to sound good. I know. Which shift do you want? I go 3 to 6 on Monday. And so off and running, there we went. But when's the first football game you want to do? Well, I'm not going to be very good. Which football game do you want to do? Do you want to do this Friday, next Friday, whatever? Da-da-da. And off we went. And did so many games. As I told you guys before we started recording, wound up being the sports director there. We had so many games. And at the time, back in the early 90s, football program was just starting out. They didn't even have the Highland Performance Center. The men's and women's basketball teams were playing somewhere at a place over on St. Charles Rock Road. So we weren't even doing any Lindenwood games on the radio except when the men's or the football team started up. We weren't doing soccer or anything. And we didn't even have LUTV at the time. We just had an access channel to the city cable channels in the city of St. Charles. So they would pre-record the football games, which I did. I did the Lindenwood football games the first couple of years. And then, but we had high school football, the Gateway Athletic Conference, Fridays for football and basketball. And then we wound up doing Legion Ball. And the other thing we did, that Glenn gave me the nod to, is I was also very passionate about hockey. And for the last 2 years I was at Lindenwood, we did the Mid-States Hockey Championship at the old arena. I mean, the now Enterprise Center wasn't even built yet. Yeah. And that was really fun and really exciting to do with all the guys that were involved in that as well. We had so much fun and learned so much. And so when I first started out at my first job at KMOX Radio, I was actually in the newsroom. I wasn't in the sports department. But Mr. Highland, who was the general manager at KMOX Radio, was also on the board of Lindenwood, and he got me hired on not full-time, but part-time as a news reporter. And he took me to the side and he says, look, Scott, I know you want to be in sports. He goes, I want you to get your feet wet, and I want you to learn how to write. I want you to learn how to report. I want you to learn how to do all this stuff, and we'll take care of you. I get great reports from you, from everybody over at Lindenwood. And just keep grinding away, and we're going to give you this opportunity, which I was, KMOX #1 radio station in the entire country at the time, and still considered one of the most visible radio stations in the country. And to get that opportunity, I wasn't even finished with Lindenwood. I had one more year left. That was It's something I will never forget, and something I always appreciate, that opportunity to get me kickstarted in my career.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed too whenever I took my tour here, and I'm sure if these guys can attest to that. It's like Lindenwood's the kind of place, like, they want you to have that experience. They want you to be a hands-on learner, not just someone who's active or passive.
100%.
Absolutely. And I will give another example, and this was probably 15 or so years ago, working for the Missouri Valley Conference. We wound up, the Valley, the conference wound up going to a neutral court for the women's basketball championship, and we had a run from Family Arena from 2008 to 2015. Before now, it's been at Moline since 2016, Moline, Illinois, Quad Cities. But my boss got together with me, and we got a hold of people who were running KCLC at the time, and they actually ran the championships of the women's tournament that whole weekend. And I actually had, some of the guys who were my interns at the radio stations that I was working at the time, whether it was Rams Radio or whatever, and they were so appreciative of getting that chance to call Division I basketball, because obviously at the time Lindenwood wasn't still NAIA, that they got that opportunity. But again, there was opportunities like you guys getting, like I got an opportunity to get on the air, like so many others unfortunately don't, through a lot of universities and colleges throughout the country.
So the name of the podcast is, like you heard, is Don't Know Ball. It's mostly about baseball, but I know nothing about baseball. I really love the sport of hockey, as you can tell by my shirt. So what did you think of the Blues game on Saturday night when we lost to the San Jose Sharks 4-0?
Did you watch the post-game show?
No, I was actually at the game.
Come on, man. Support a brother now. Come on, we're Lindenwood guys. It was not only disappointing, it was confusing. I mean, they actually got off to a great start in the first period, put everything at San Jose, and their goaltender, Blackwood, was magnificent. And here's a team that only won one game in their last 19. Only won one game in their last 19. And to only come up with 3 shots on goal and look like they did in the second period is, especially when you still have slim playoff hopes alive, was just baffling, confusing, and terribly disappointing.
Yeah.
And nobody had any answers for it after the game. We ran a bunch of post-game sound, whether it was the coach, heard some comments from some of the players who really couldn't come up with the answer, whether it was Colton Parayko or Braden Shin or whatever. And now, while you still have some playoff hopes alive, I mean, it's about as dim as it can get, and disappointing. And I think there are a lot of people, I was out there, thought maybe, just maybe, this might be the team that at least gets you back to the playoffs as an 8th seed. But, the likelihood of that happening is slim to none. And I think it's disappointing. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the offseason. But you're up against the cap, and I don't know what this team is going to do. I do know Doug Armstrong, and I've known him since day one, since he was actually an assistant GM under Larry Plow before Larry retired. And I don't see Doug, and I haven't talked to him personally about this, but I know him well enough. He's not happy about this. And I don't know if he can do a lot, but I'm sure he's going to do what he can this summer to try to make this team better, because while you're in a retool, the Blues are in a retool, they don't want the thing to go all the way down. They want this to be a quick turnaround, or as quickly as possible. I think that from everything I understand, and I'm not an expert on prospects or anything like that, but the people that I know within the league over these many years covering the league, is that the Blues really did very well in the draft, and that they have a pretty good deep prospect pool. So the future is bright. It's just a matter of how quickly can they turn a lot of these young kids around. I think one of the things they have to concentrate in this summer, whether it's by a free agency, if they can, financially, trade, or especially in the draft, because looking at some of the stuff and reading some of the stuff as far as the draft is concerned, there's apparently, even just in the first round, a lot of first-round available defensemen. And I think that's really where this hockey team needs to beef up for now and in the future. They need some help on defense. I think the right side of the defense is fine, but I think the left side of the defense is something that they really need. Plus, they need some more secondary scoring. Can they get it? Again, do they have the money to get it? There's a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud Dalibor Dvorsky, a couple of guys who come in and boost you, maybe, but you can't expect a lot from a rookie. I know they have very high hopes on Snuggerud.
I'm quite excited to see him play.
Pardon?
I'm quite excited to see Jimmy Snuggerud play and wear a blue note. He looks fantastic playing up in Minnesota.
I had two people tell me that his shot is similar to Vladimir Tarasenko's, which Vladdy, I'm old enough, I watched Brett Hull. The most amazing thing you would ever see as a Blues fan. But even Holy would say Tarasenko's shot coming off of his stick was better than Brett's. So if Jimmy Snuggerud's is like Vladdy Tarasenko, that's something to be really excited about. But again, how much can you put on a 22-year-old kid to score 30, 40 goals in his first year coming out of college? I mean, I don't, unless you're a Bedard. I mean, he's not a Bedard, no disrespect. He has talent, but, Connor's a once-in-a-lifetime type of kid, kind of like Crosby was many years ago. So this is a staging process, but I know this, that they don't want this thing to last forever. They want to retool and turn this thing around as quickly as possible, and that's why I think that the president of hockey operations and the general manager might be a little busy to try to amp this thing up in the summer.
I completely agree with our defense. When I first started watching hockey, it was 2008, 2009. So like Paul Kariya, Keith Tkachuk, Andy McDonald, Lee Stepniak were all forwards. And our defense was like Eric Brewer and all them. They were great to watch. And then over these past few seasons, it's been tough to watch our defense just fall. But
it is. But I will say this, and I will say that Colton Parayko last year was a disappointment.
He was.
And I think Parayko has really turned his game around and played so much better. I thought last year, actually, Justin Falk was the best player on the ice for the Blues. And I think he's still dealing with his injuries, but he's fighting through it. But I think on the right side, and it's not just me, because I've asked some people about Kessel. He's not going to flash you, but I think he just does the basics, and people who played the game have told me that they think that this kid has a future, especially as a third, or maybe even throw him in as a second pair defenseman, especially on the right side. So I think your right side seems to be in a pretty good shape. It's the left side I think they gotta look at.
100%. Yeah, any hockey questions, Lucas?
I don't know if I have hockey questions necessarily, but I mean, baseball just started. We could talk about baseball.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the Cardinals so far? Because I'm sure you're not one to overreact like the rest of us. So,
who's the rest of us, though?
I mean, you're 4 games into it. You're playing a team that's by far, even on paper or even on the field, is the best. Yeah. I mean, I was telling people at work, we were talking about this before the pregame show Saturday. I said, look, they have Glass now. They have Bobby Miller, who I think is going to be just ridiculous.
Yep.
He's got a lot of good potential.
And they have Yamamoto. Walker Buehler is going to be back sometime later this year.
Yep.
And I just read where Shohei is going to go back and pitch next year.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, you also have Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin. I mean,
hey, and Clayton Kershaw.
They're 9 deep.
Yeah.
What the heck's going on?
And
that's unfair.
Bob Nightingale said yesterday
everybody wants to hammer the Dodgers for going out and spending the money. They have it. They're doing it. Do we have a situation in Major League Baseball that needs to severely be looked at because you're having the separation of the haves and the have-nots? Absolutely. That's not the Dodgers' fault. That's Major League Baseball situation that they have to seriously look at. And I'm going to say this, and it sort of kind of involves me because I don't have any insight. We're all kind of wondering what's happening with our regional and other regionals. But when you look at it, especially like the San Diegos, the Arizona, and the Colorado Rockies, who are now Major League Baseball has taken over their broadcasts. So they're not getting any money from a regional standpoint, where the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Cubs and the Red Sox, they're making all this money. And other teams are not. And if they lose their regionals, like let's say a Cincinnati, a Pittsburgh, or whoever, well, where are they going to get that extra financial wherewithal to try to somehow keep up with the Joneses, so to speak? And so to me, I know we're getting off beat with the Cardinals. I think that's a serious problem. Now, to get back to what the Cardinals are dealing with right now, Dodgers are the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
The Cardinals have a lot of injuries. Now, I'm not making excuses. This is the truth. Now, the Cardinals also, when you look at their schedule in the first month of the season, the schedule maker didn't do them any favor.
No, not at all.
Because now, I was watching part of the Padres. Schulte's got a heck of a lineup, man.
Yep.
And now that they got Dylan Cease, you got Cease, Musgrove, and Darvish as your top three. That's a heck of a rotation, man. We'll see 2 of the 3, I think, this upcoming week. Oh, by the way, Skippy Schumacher's Florida Marlins are coming into town, and then you got the Philadelphia Phillies, and then you got to go play the Arizona Diamondbacks, and then you finally go to Oakland where they're probably and you got the A's, but then you come back home and you got Milwaukee, who swept the Mets, and then you got Arizona. That's a gauntlet. Yeah. Especially when you don't have your number one starter. Now, you're hoping, and the people I've talked to think that sometime by the middle of this month in April that you'll get Sonny Gray back, which is obviously going to be a massive boost for this starting rotation. Now, the other part of it is, and I know people are falling off, the bullpen. I know people that I work with who've been down at spring training since day one, and they will tell you the bullpen is so much better than last year. But you also have to take into consideration this, that beginning of the year, guys aren't totally stretched out yet. Even as long as spring training is now compared to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, they're not stretched out. So guys like Lance Lynn are going to give you 6 or 7 innings. Michaelis is going to give you more, and he has throughout. If you look at his career in St. Louis, he's probably been the guy that's given you more innings than anybody else in the rotation. Gray's going to be the same way. I thought Matz pitched magnificently against that lineup. Steven Matz, after he got out of the bullpen, if you remember, before he got injured, he was back in the starting rotation. He was terrific. So my point is yeah, I understand the disappointment or whatever. Let's see this whole thing play out. I think this team is better than last year. I think the other part of it is how much better are the teams in the Central Division? Because let's be honest, Central Division is a one playoff division.
Yeah,
the West is just absolutely loaded for bear. Frisco's made themselves better. Arizona's obviously very good. Dodgers, San Diego. And then you go over to the East Coast. You got the Braves, who may be the one team that can knock off the Dodgers, at least on paper. And on top of that, you got a Philadelphia Phillies lineup in the starting rotation that's absolutely incredible as well. So I think watching what the Brewers, the Cubs, and the Reds are doing is, I think, what will probably give us a better answer as we move further down the line where the Cardinals stack up. And again, once the Cardinals get healthy, once they get Nootbaar back in the outfield, hopefully Dylan Carlson. I understand Edmonds going to still be out for a little while. You get Sonny Gray, you get Middleton, who you acquired in free agency, to help out your middle of your relief. You get that all ironed out here, hopefully in short order. Then let's see what this ball club has.
Do you have a breakout candidate this year? Somebody you think is going to be? Yeah.
That's a good question. I think, although it didn't look good in the first weekend, and I go by people that I'm blessed to work with because they played the game and they like a guy like either Jim Edmonds or Brad Thompson, Al Rabosky, Rico, or whatever. These guys see a game that we're just fans. And so when I'm blessed enough to sit in our green room, which is just off the side of our studio down at Ballpark Village, when we have the game on, they notice stuff. And I'm like, how do you see that? That's insane. But I know Jimmy has said this a number of times. He thinks Nolan Gorman can hit 40-plus home runs.
Yeah.
I think the guy, he's going to strike out a lot. That's just kind of the nature of the beast, the way the game is. That kid, and even Jim's like, that kid has such raw power. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, Luke, I'm going to go with Nolan Gorman getting at least 30 home runs this year because I think he could be just an absolute stud.
I'm a big fan of Victor Scott right now. I don't know how long he's going to stay up here.
I love him. Yeah. I think he's great. And he can play defense. That's one of the things because everybody talks about the stolen bases, but that kid can play defense, and I think that's absolutely outstanding. That's why I like defense. I grew up in the 80s. So watching Ozzy and all those guys, that's Willie McGee, Tommy Herr, Keith Hernandez, all of it. That's kind of what I grew up with as a kid. So I loved to watch defense. And when the Cardinals were really good at defense a few years ago, when Bader was out in center field, those guys, I loved watching that. The amount of runs that they can help and save the pitching staff is just incredible. I mean, especially when you got Goldie and Arenado at the corners. I mean, Tommy Edman won a Gold Glove. Colton Wong won a Gold Glove over at second base as well. Paul DeYoung really matured into a very good shortstop, was considered for a Gold Glove at one point as well. I love watching that. And I think Victor Scott, the way he plays outfield on top of what he can bring you offensively, I think what's cool about it, to watch it again as someone older than obviously you guys, is the fact that, the Cardinals back in the 80s, they were so fun because they ran a lot. Vince Coleman had a couple of years of 100-plus stolen bases. You guys have never seen that because it's either home runs or strikeouts.
Yep.
So to see the throwback a little bit, and I understand this, Cardinals aren't the only team that have guys like Victor Scott, that we might start seeing more stolen bases. That's going to be really exciting. I know some people are out there complaining that Mason Wynn squared up to move a runner over to advance the runner into scoring position. Like, oh, you just wasted out. No, you didn't.
No,
what if Mason Wynn struck out? That guy wouldn't have advanced.
Yeah, and I
He's
think it was
playing old school baseball, and again, old school me. I thought it was fantastic.
I mean,
I hope we see that more from the Cardinals.
I think it's the way they need to move. I mean, if you're going to have Scott and Wynn at the bottom of the lineup, you have to start doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the one thing I can tell you from experience, again, watching the Cardinals back in the 80s, with that, putting that pressure on, putting the ball in play instead of striking out, you're putting pressure on the defense. You're putting pressure on those pitchers because they have to be perfect, but they also have to watch out for a sacrifice. They got to watch out Victor Scott or Mason Wynn or even Jordan Walker. I mean, we got some speed on this team. Brendan Donovan. You got to watch out. You got to make sure that you're watching, holding those guys over at first or even second base for that matter. That puts pressure on the other team, and that's what makes it fun. And I agree, especially in the bottom of your lineup with these guys. I think that could make things really fun to set up what you got at the top of the order once you start moving through a game.
100%. Can we end this really quick and rejoin from the same link? Because it's going to end in 2 minutes because I'm not paying for, Zoom Pro, whatever it's called. So,
right.
All right, cool.
It's expensive.
It is expensive.
$50 a month.
Yeah.
I had something to say, and then it never.
I figure you can. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I was going to say something about the Dodgers deferring money, but it passed.
You can talk about it.
We don't need to go back to it.
He's got a good point though, because they're going to sign Roki Sasaki too. They're going to be 10 deep.
That's what I was going to tell him, but
I was going to jump in and say something about deferring money. That's why I grabbed the mic.
You can talk if you want.
I know I can. I just don't want to cut him off.
Really good point about the local media outlets. I didn't think about that. Like the local sports network.
Yeah, I can hear him fine.
Okay.
I didn't know you even had it turned.
Hmm?
I thought it was
didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
I just did.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear him. Okay. Everything he's saying.
Mine was loose.
Not clearly, but I can hear him enough that I know
it was
what he's
loose
talking
in
about.
there.
Yeah, that's why it was cutting out.
He seems interested.
Yes.
More than I thought. No, yeah, that is very loose.
Let's just hope he comes back.
We really only have 4 weeks left of the semester.
5, but that last week I don't think we're going to be
count.
here very often.
We don't have to be here.
No research class tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, he does. Yeah, I forgot. Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks for being a politician or whatever you are.
I have a feeling that we'll probably get to the last week and she'll say only come if you need to work on your project or want to reshoot. And
I don't think anybody's going to show up.
No.
I might, but oh well.
Yeah, I might to hang out, but if I can stay home.
That is a long drive.
Oh, what is Caleb saying something interesting to me? Well, you don't have to talk in the mic.
No, I want to talk in the mic.
Be prepared for severe weather.
Is that an email?
Yeah.
From
the National Weather Service is predicting severe weather for the greater St. Louis, St. Charles, St. Louis area today and tomorrow.
Tomorrow, too?
The university has a team of individuals monitoring the forecast.
Team of individuals is Andrew and, like,
John Porter. and remains in close communication with the NWS, so National Weather Service. They didn't put the initials on first reference, but that's just the journalism of me. We are providing guidance as well as information about different communications you receive. Then NATO watch, NATO warning county, NATO warning proximity, NATO warning campus, all clear.
It's supposed to hail in the afternoon, and then there's
supposed to start like here pretty soon.
Yeah, the first wave has the biggest threat's hail, and then it's going to come through again this evening, and then that's what the tornado threat is.
If it's still like
if
unstable,
the right, yeah, which I think they are. It's pretty humid outside.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it got very humid quick. Huh? There he is. Do you guys want to ask something first? Who wants to take the phone?
You can keep going with what you're going, and we'll jump in.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the breakout question. I was going to chime in.
That was a great question.
I'm surprised he said Dorman though.
I have my. You already know mine, but it already got spoiled because he got injured.
We could talk about the deferring money thing if you want.
Yeah, I want to ask about that.
Okay.
Riley O'Brien.
What?
Riley O'Brien.
I'm telling you, man.
Better be an April Fool's joke.
Well,
What?
April
What
Fool's isn't
happened?
funny. My hottest hot take is that April Fool's is just not funny. Like, it hasn't been funny since I was in second grade.
April Fool's is not funny because I got it. You know, they told me I was going to have school on my birthday one year when I was in third grade, and ever since then I hated April
that's
Fool's.
about the last time it was funny.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not paying. I think it's like, what was it? What is
It's
it?
like $50 a month to pay for Zoom.
Yeah.
$50 a month. Jesus.
How many podcasts have you guys done?
This is 12.
This is 12. Yeah.
Yeah, 12.
11 or 12.
11 or
There's
12.
9 up, I think. There's 3 we cut.
Yeah. Jack wanted to go back to the Dodgers for a second and ask you something.
We talked about the Dodger money and the payroll and all that. How do you feel about them deferring so much money? Like the Ohtani, $700 million, $680 to $700 million deferred.
They can do it. Like I said, dude, if Major League Baseball now sees a wrinkle in the system and they've got to figure it out, how can you blame the Dodgers?
That's how I see it, too.
You can't.
Yeah.
And especially if a player is willing to do that. Now, how many players are willing to defer, especially that much money? And that's a lot of money. I think we can all agree. But, I mean, if they can do it, I mean, they can. But again, to me, we have a problem in the game. And so others are going to try this, and the big money teams are going to pull this off. Now, what happens to the Dodgers once, you know, in whatever, 10 years or whatever, when they have to start paying off Ohtani? I mean, but, you know, they're rolling the dice for the here and now and not the future. And, you know, I think it'll probably wind up paying off. But overall, what are we doing for the game? I don't think we're doing what's best for the game. And it's a conversation that needs to have they need to have a serious conversation to
There's definitely
see how
a way the league could
wrinkles
fix
like
it.
this.
They could outlaw being able to defer money or something where you can't defer $680 million.
A salary cap.
Well,
I don't even know if it's that.
I think it's like
just
ridiculous.
Well, there's no salary cap. It's a tax or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. That's what they
Well, the luxury tax
when
still
you go
occurs,
over.
isn't it?
But these teams make so much money that they're like, what do we care? We'll pay the extra
Tax is
so
nothing to
we
them.
have a chance to win.
Yeah.
And again, the smaller market teams, there's no advantage, and that's, you know, like I was going back to the whole regional situation. When you're hockey, when you're the NBA, you have a cap.
Mm-hmm.
So these big market teams like New York and LA, whatever, they can't do this. Where in Major League Baseball, I'm all for people making as much money as they can, players, whoever. That's a part of, you know, our country, but you got to have something where we're having a level playing field, because right now I just don't know, in my personal opinion, that we have a level playing field as far as the finances are concerned among teams in Major League Baseball, because there is no floor, there is no ceiling as far as pay structure is concerned for players.
You end up getting that 6-headed monster out in L.A. and then 10 deep pitching staff of all superstars.
Yep.
And the one they don't even talk about is Bobby Miller. Here's the best pitching performance I think I've seen ever in a long time. At least. Bobby Miller.
Who's that?
The Dodgers.
On Friday night.
I didn't watch the game Friday night.
Wow.
I'm telling you what,
He carved
that
us
dude
up.
is so wicked. He is so good.
Watch Bobby Miller highlights.
If his arm holds up, man, this guy could be something really special. I mean, he can throw the ball triple figures, and he's a starter.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, like when the Cardinals put Jordan Hicks in as a starter, because that's what Jordan has always wanted to do, and now he's doing it with the Giants. They tell you kind of have to, you can't go throw 100 miles an hour consistently. So you got to scale it back a little bit so you have a little bit more longevity instead of going 1 or 2 innings, even though Jordan Hicks is pretty much, from what I've seen up close and other people who played the game, it's kind of a freak of nature with how hard he could throw the baseball. He wasn't even that big of a stature of a kid. But with all that being said, Miller's just got some just nasty stuff. And to think about it, again, go back to what I said about next year, if Ohtani's coming back and all of Bueller, and Miller might be their 4th or 5th starter. For most teams, he'd be the number 1 starter even in his young 20s.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
And they can't really move anybody to trade for, like, to upgrade elsewhere because you can't really upgrade elsewhere.
Like, it's hard to upgrade when you're
maybe the bullpen. Maybe
it's hard to upgrade when you're 1 through 4 goes. Ohtani,
they
Betts,
could upgrade their bullpen. But as much as they spend money, and they do, but you got to give them credit. As somebody I work with pointed out, is the fact that here's a team that's been successful for a number of years, and they're still drafting, even though they're drafting way down in the draft. They're still drafting very well, and they're developing very well. So I think that's also a testament. You got to tip your cap to the Dodgers because they put in a lot of money and investment in drafting and developing within their organization. Sure, they're going out and spending money, keeping guys, or bringing the Mookie Bettses and signing him, and signing Freddie Freeman and what have you, Ohtani, Yamamoto, blah blah blah. But they've also drafted and developed a lot of guys as well, and I think that's a credit to their organization.
Absolutely. You talked about how the bullpen kind of struggled too, and I said this, me and Lucas were having a conversation while we were watching the game on Saturday, talking about how we were hoping that it was just a hiccup from Helsley. And, I mean, in his defense, it's hard to, come into a game and close it out whenever you're facing the heart of quite possibly the best lineup in baseball.
Yep.
Yeah, it is, but that's what he's paid to do, I mean, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And that's one of the things I've learned in that, covering the game is the fact that, especially if you're a closer, but overall players in general, whatever sport it is, I mean, you have to have a short memory, whether it's success or failure, because the next day really is the next day. I know it sounds like coach speak or player speak when you guys see those sound bites, but it really is true, because if you let some of that stuff linger, whether you failed or even when you succeed, I mean, the game can humble you. I remember Mike Shannon telling me this a number of times, having conversations. He's like, look, Scott, I'll tell you, man, as a player, I was given a gift by God. He goes, but this game can humble you in the New York second. He goes, you just watch. You'll have some guy go 4 for 4, 5 for 5 one day, and the next day or the next 5 days, he might go 0 for 4. He goes, that's just baseball. And so, yeah, Helsley couldn't close it out, but you know what? He's got such nasty stuff. Mm-hmm. He can be one of the premier closers in the game. He truly can if he can stay healthy. But it wouldn't surprise me next time he's out there, he gets a 1, 2, 3 inning. I mean, and nothing is hardly easy in this game unless you're one of the absolute elites to come into a game and close the game out and have an easy 1, 2, 3 inning. There are very, very few that have been able to do it for many, many years. And I remember Tony La Russa saying this a number of times. I remember somebody posed the question to him again a number of times and said, look, if you got an expansion team, you got a baseball team, what would be your first move, your most important move? And he said, the most important player on my team, the first move I would make is to make sure I got a 100% absolute for sure closer. At the time, it was Eckersley, who he had in Oakland before Mac came here to St. Louis. But that was what Tony, one of the greatest managers of all time in Major League Baseball history, has said is closer is the absolute number one guy that he would start out with if he had an expansion team.
Yeah, it's you said it too. Like, it's when you're a starter, you kind of have the luxury of affording to have one bad inning because you know you're going to have 5 or 6 more to go. But as a reliever, if you come out there and you're not locked in, you're going to get eaten up.
Mm-hmm. You are, absolutely. And the game is so much more specialized now. I think that's the unique thing that we talked about earlier is the fact that, this ball club has brought in guys. Sure, they're, as they would say, longer in the tooth, older, but they have the experience. And as I've mentioned, is they have length. What I mean by length is pitching more innings. And then we can go back to even 2021 when the Cardinals had a relief corps that was just, they were already flat out tired. They were overused because you didn't have guys that were giving them length, that weren't giving them innings. And then you wound up picking off literally from the scrap heap, Jay Happ, and you get John Lester, and they find this second coming, and they really help your team literally to get into the playoffs. Now, granted, they had the great run in September, but again, those guys helped out not only the rotation that was struggling, but also the bullpen because you were getting length. You go back to 2022. Cardinals go out and they get Jordan Montgomery and they get Jose Quintana. That helped that team because guess what? The bullpen was out of gas because, again, you weren't getting the length that you really needed from that starting rotation. So it's kind of like a domino effect, as they say. And I think the domino effect can help this bullpen. Again, people I talk to that have been down in spring training, been in the game forever, say this is a much better bullpen, and it's even going to be preserved to be ready for the dog days of summer because you anticipate at least that a lot of these guys you brought in, the Sonny Grays, the Lance Lynn's, maybe the Kyle Gibsons, are going to give you length. And instead of guys coming in the 5th inning, they're not going to come in until 6th or possibly even the 7th or 8th inning. And that's going to be a huge, huge benefit for this ball club and this bullpen specifically.
Absolutely. You have broadcasted and been a host for a lot of different sports. I know you work with the Missouri Valley Conference in both baseball and basketball doing that tournament. But do you have like a specific favorite sport that you like to broadcast for? Is there one that like really stands out over the others?
No. I mean, I'm just blessed to do it all, to be honest with you. I mean, I appreciate all the opportunities I've been given. Like anybody else in life, no matter what you do, and personally or professionally, I've hit some roadblocks along the way, and I've fought through it. But I mean, I also do football for the Missouri Valley Conference, and have done so since 2001. I enjoy that. I enjoy both the men's and women's basketball, baseball tournaments, fun, doing play-by-play. I've done all kinds of high school over the many, many years, even after Lindenwood. There are games specifically in my mind that I can still visibly remember back in the 90s, calling high school playoff games for WGNU Radio. It was the small radio station that I worked with that did high school sports, and I did our sports talk show a few days a week. So sure, there's, I just called a championship buzzer beater for the Drake women to make it to the NCAA tournament over Missouri State. And it was awesome. I got to call for the first time, and I've been with the Valley for 20 years for basketball. I got to call my first regular season clinching championship for the Indiana State Sycamores in the final day of the regular season. That was pretty cool. I've been blessed. Do I have any favorites? No. Credible moments, I would say for me, again, being blessed to do all this, probably right up there, probably the top is the Blues winning the Stanley Cup championship because I grew up here. So I was a fan of the Cardinals. I was a fan of the Blues. I was a football Cardinals fan when the football Cardinals were here before they moved to Arizona. We went to all the games. My parents, we had season tickets to everything. So to actually be a part of those broadcasts of those teams that you rooted for as a kid growing up also has a little special spice to it. But winning the Stanley Cup after many, many years and becoming close friends with Bernie Federico and Bob Plager, the late Bob Plager, and so many others that, gave their all to this this organization and this team for them to finally win it. But for me, and I know so many people and so many of my friends, like,
Hello?
You froze up.
Oh, it froze.
Oh,
Yeah, it froze.
I miss Bobby Plager.
Oh, it's back. It's back.
huh?
You froze up a little bit.
Bobby
I miss him.
was awesome.
Number 5
Bobby
in your
was a
program.
tremendous man.
Yeah, he was. Number 5
What's
in your
that? I miss that.
Oh, number 5 in your program, number 1 in your heart.
That's exactly right, and that's the truth. Funny dude too. But I mean, I was blessed in 2011. I was doing pre and post game at KMOX on the weekends for the Cardinals. So sat there and was part of the Cardinals championship, which again was amazing to be a part of that. I think we're all spoiled, and hence we're always talking about the Cardinals. But the reason, Cardinal mania is what it is in this, not only this town, but this region, is because of the long-standing success that this organization has had for many, many decades, not just years, many, many decades. And so we're spoiled. I've seen in my lifetime, I've seen 7 World Series, 3 World Series championships, but I've seen 7 and been to 7 World Series in my lifetime. A lot of kids in a lot of cities who have teams that can be my age or even older and have maybe seen one if they were lucky. Think about the Cubs. Perfect example. They had to wait, 108 years before they finally won the World Series championship. The other amazing moment for me personally was in 2000. So just getting started in the business, and Rams Radio was looking for somebody to do some studio stuff, and they hired me. I was literally green, and that was the greatest show on turf here. And for someone who lost, a city that lost a team, had no team, and then the Rams come in and they weren't very good, and then they have that Super Bowl championship, was absolutely incredible. I remember still to this day, and we'll never forget being at the Georgia Dome there in Atlanta, and we were sitting there right before kickoff, and I was sitting towards the back of the booth, and Mike Bush at Channel 5 was actually the voice of the Rams that year, which is the late Jack Snow. And he went to a break, and he turned around and he goes, "We're at the freaking Super Bowl. Can you believe it?" We're like, no. We were like all in just like this haze of like, are we really here? Is this like something we're dreaming of? It truly was amazing. And I think for them to do what they did to our city and what the NFL did to our city was pretty crappy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes it hurt even more, is because I think there is a humongous fan base for football. You see it even with the, what is it called, the UFL now, with the Battlehawks. Yeah, this is a football town. People will support football. And I think that's what hurts most, is because, they badmouthed our city and said we were just a baseball town, which I guarantee you that's not the case. I look at our ratings, even as the Cardinals struggled last year, we're still, I think, second overall out of all the regionals in baseball ratings. We're still one of the top 4, even though the Blues are struggling again this year, not a playoff type of team that's guaranteed to, make a run or whatever. People are still watching. And we're still, for us, Bally Sports Midwest, our sales are great. And it's a testament because why? Call me a homer. I just think that we have an incredible sports fan base in this metro area, in this region. I really do, for Blues and Cardinals and for our soccer team. And I just think that, I always tell people who are from out of town, you go out to Los Angeles and it's all about the actors and blah, blah, blah. You go to D.C. and it's about the politicians. New York, it's all about the actors or whatever. In St. Louis, it's about our professional athletes and our professional sports teams. That's what we're passionate about. And I've seen it, being lucky enough to be pals with some of these people that have played for the Cardinals or the Blues. And you go out to dinner or whatever, and people are just like, hey, saying hi. They're so cordial and so great. And I know those guys all appreciate, them still being recognized after all these years. And again, I think it's a testament to what sports truly means to our community.
Absolutely. You talk about how blessed you were being able to witness the 2019 Stanley Cup run, the World Series runs that the Cardinals had, being able to go to the Super Bowl the year that the Rams won. Do you have any personal favorite stories that you have from being around so many great athletes and so many talented players or managers or coaches or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I mean, from a hockey standpoint, I mean, I grew up watching Bernie. Now he's like a friend. Like we hang out, you know. I mean, he's got a family, but I'm saying we'll text or we'll go out to dinner sometime or whatever. He's just an incredible human being. I always tell people that if you don't even know anything about hockey, this man is in the Hockey Hall of Fame, in which there aren't even 1,000 players that have played the game that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame yet in Toronto. He's one of them, but when you meet him, you just think he's like you and I, just another guy, because he's so humble and so giving and so grateful. And it was the 2017, I believe, first round of the playoffs. And it was coming off, remember, 2016, the Blues finally beat the Blackhawks in the first round. They eventually lose to the San Jose Sharks in the third round in the conference finals, did not make the Stanley Cup once again. Next year, we're playing Minnesota in the opening round, and we wind up losing. And before we started our post-game show, I looked at Bernie, and just the sorrow, the being so upset, I'm like, man, this dude really, as the quote unquote thing goes, bleeds blue. This man truly, this is his life. And I felt he was like so disappointed, because I think he really thought maybe that might have been the year. Obviously, 2 years removed, we finally get it. But just to see him and how upset and depressed he was after the Blues had lost. The other story I'll give you is after the Rams won in 2000, Super Bowl win in 2000, they would have their two-a-days or training camp in Western Illinois University in Macomb. And so it was right after one of the first practices. And so in the morning practice, which normally went 8 to 10, you got to interview players after that practice. After the evening session, which was normally 4 to 6, you would interview just the coach, whether it was Dick Vermeil or Mike Martz, what have you, whoever was the coach at the time. So in 2000, obviously, Martz took over for Dick Vermeil. Warner's the MVP of the league, the Super Bowl, blah, 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 blah. So there's media from ESPN, you name it. They're all there. Radio, TV, print. I mean, it's massive, massive media. And Kurt's talking after the morning practice. And I mean, I'm just working in radio, and I got a mic, and there's like no way I can get anywhere near Kurt to hear what he has to say and all these questions. So I'm like, I'm here all week, 2 weeks, whatever. I'll eventually get something from Kurt, because all the national media is there, and they're like there that day and they're gone. So they're kind of pushed towards the front, towards Kurt. Anyway, there's this little young guy. He's probably 16, 17 years old, from Iowa. And he's on the outside looking in like the rest of us. And Rick Smith, who was the PR director at the time, notices as the young man, because he had to get a credential through Rick to go to practice. So after the whole 10-minute thing with Kurt, which I'm sure most of you have seen or watched Kurt, I mean, he's a gregarious personality. He can talk, what have you, blah, 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 blah. So Rick Smith, the PR director, grabs Kurt and he goes, hey, you see this little young guy over here? He's from wherever, Iowa. And he wanted to do an interview with you for his radio station in Iowa. Absolutely. So here's this 16, 17-year-old guy. And Rick brings Kurt Warner, the Super Bowl MVP and the Super Bowl of the league, over. And he introduces this 17-year-old guy. And this dude, guys, he's shaking. He's like, oh, my God, he's so nervous, And Kurt's just like, hey, how you doing? Great to meet you. I went to Northern Iowa, know the area well, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, yeah. He goes, you want to do an interview? He's like, yeah, do you mind? He goes, oh, absolutely not. Turn on and it was the old thing where you have to press the buttons, old cassette recorder interview. And he starts like stuttering. He's struggling because he's just in awe that he's talking to Kurt Warner. So Kurt goes, oh, you want to ask me about, being the Super Bowl MVP? Well, sure. And he goes through this long answer. And this goes on literally, guys, for over 5 minutes. And he shakes the kid's hand. He goes, "It is a pleasure to meet you," Kurt did. Turned around and walked away. And this kid had a smile on his face from ear to ear. It's absolutely incredible that Kurt made that young boy's complete life. And to add to Kurt, after those evening practices from 4 to 6, March would talk to us. After they get off the practice field, they would go into like this little area where their locker room was. Well, Dan Linza, who was the head of security for the Rams for many, many years, he was a former chief of police in the city of Kirkwood. Dan brought out like this little cardboard table with 2 chairs. And so when practice was done, players would go in, Kurt would take his shoulder pads off and his helmet, and there would be a line down to the street and then down at least 1 block. And Kurt would sign every autograph, take every picture, and it could be till after 8 o'clock when it's dark out, until the last person was done taking a picture or getting an autograph with Kurt. He would sit there the whole time and oblige to whatever fan, whatever they want. Kurt was one of the most amazing people I had ever seen, and people who have been in the business long before me have been way more successful. Guys like Jim Thomas, who's now retired, Bernie Miklasz. I mean, both of those gentlemen, along with so many others, we've never seen anything like this before in our life. And even to this day, 20, whatever, some odd years later, I've never seen anyone like Kurt Warner. There's a lot of good people out there. But Kurt Warner, again, I'm telling you a story that I can still remember vividly 4 years ago. He was absolutely one of the most incredible people I've ever covered or watched in my life. Absolutely amazing.
He, as someone who grew up a Rams fan because of Kurt Warner and hearing his story, just as inspirational of a story as it is, he's just also one of those guys that I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything negative about him as a person.
He still does the coat, Warner's warm-up, where he collects coats for the less fortunate here in St. Louis. And I think he still, once a year, builds a home for someone less fortunate here in St. Louis. Does a lot more because he and his wife, they all live out in Arizona now. But he still does stuff for this community. And how long he left, 2003, 2004? That's like 20 some odd years ago. And I remember, it's funny, thinking about this, is when the Cardinals made the trade for Paul Goldschmidt. And I got to know some of the guys on the Arizona Cardinals broadcast when I was doing the Ram stuff, pre and post game. Ron Wolfley, who actually played for the St. Louis Rams and the St. Louis Football Cardinals, has been their analyst forever. Wolf's awesome. And so Wolf asked me to go on their show because I wanted to know about Luke Weaver and Carson Kelly. I said, yeah, sure. So they're asking me, hey, what about Luke? What about Carson? And I'm giving, some of the information during their morning show. He does the morning drive for the all sports station down in Phoenix. And I said, what can you tell me about Paul Goldschmidt? And they're like, well, you remember Kurt Warner? I'm like, well, of course we all remember Kurt Warner. Well, you remember how much Kurt gives to the communities. I said, well, guys, he's still actually giving to the St. Louis community. And they're like, well, Paul Goldschmidt is the same way, except you just don't know about it. He just kind of does it behind the scenes. It's kind of like what Matt Holliday did. So I was like, well, if that's the case, Paul Goldschmidt is going to be gold in this town. And here, Goldie's been with the team for 4 or 5 years. You don't hear about any of the stuff that Paul, I know about, that he gives to our community. And it just shows what an incredible human being he is. And, look at what Matt Holliday did. We didn't really know about it until Matt's final year, where it started to become a little bit more public, how he used to go to Cardinal Glennon after games and give out bats and batting gloves and balls and gloves to, some of those poor kids who are fighting through, maybe for their life or what have you, over at Cardinal Glennon. It's pretty amazing. And Paul Goldschmidt's kind of in that same category.
To me, I think it's a little more impressive, too, whenever you do that without the public knowing, because it just shows that you're doing it because you're doing it to be a good person. You're not doing it to get some good attention or good publicity for yourself.
And that's not to say that Kurt isn't doing it because Kurt is a great person. He truly is. I just gave you some examples, and that just scratches the surface of what Kurt's done. At Waino, Adam Wainwright's the same way. I mean, Waino's given so much to so many with his foundation. People don't even realize just half of what Adam has done for so many people, not only less fortunate, but even a lot of people within the baseball industry, not even Cardinal players, but other players that they sought out him for advice or something. And he was just, Wayne was another one of those guys who's just constantly giving, and that's what he loves to do. He loves to help other people, and that's what makes people like that so special.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, do you have anything else you want to add?
Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, and best of luck to you guys. And keep grinding away, man. That's all I like to say. Keep Lindenwood alive.
We'll for sure do our best. Well, Scott, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciated talking to you. We really appreciated the stories that you had to offer. If everyone else, if you've listened this far, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Don't Know Ball podcast, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.